Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, July 14th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, we're looking at a high of 91.1 degrees today, and temperatures will dip to 70.4 degrees as we head into the evening. It is Bastille Day, so we wish a happy holiday to everyone observing today. Regarding our top stories, we are taking a closer look at the tension between the United States and Iran at the Strait of Hormuz and breaking down the implications of the situation. We are also examining the legal actions several states are taking to stop the proposed merger between Paramount and Warner Bros. Plus, we will cover a variety of other stories making headlines. All this and much more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, and welcome back. We've been following the escalating conflict between the United States and Iran, now centered on control of the Strait of Hormuz. For the latest, we're joined by our reporter Ethan. Ethan, where do things stand this morning?
Good morning, Grace. As we reported on Monday, the 60-day peace framework had collapsed and the U.S. had launched major strikes. Well, since then, things have only intensified. According to CBS News, CNN, and the Associated Press, the U.S. military has now carried out 3 consecutive nights of airstrikes against Iranian targets. This is a dramatic step up from what we described just a day ago.
3 straight nights. What triggered this newest round?
It goes back to Saturday, July 11th, which was just 3 days ago. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, attacked a Cyprus-flagged container vessel near the western entrance of the Strait of Hormuz. That attack sparked a fire and left 1 crew member missing. The U.S. treated it as a direct provocation, and the response has been relentless ever since.
And what exactly did the U.S. hit in these latest strikes?
U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, says the most recent wave was a 5-hour mission. It targeted maritime capabilities, coastal defense systems, and missile and drone sites. Specific targets included the ports of Bushehr, Bandar Abbas, Konarak, Jask, Abu Musa, and Chabahar. CNN reports the strikes used precision munitions, and notably, this marked the first combat use of sea drones to hit a naval base.
Sea drones in combat. That's a real milestone, isn't it?
It really is, Grace. We'd been hearing about one-way attack drones in the air, but deploying sea drones against a naval base is new territory. It signals how much the U.S. is leaning on emerging technology here. And President Trump went further, specifically mentioning plans to, quote, take out, end quote, Pickaxe Mountain. Analysts associate that site with Iran's nuclear program, so it's a significant escalation.
How is the U.S. supporting an operation of this size in the air?
Flight tracking data tells the story. There were at least a dozen U.S. military aircraft over Saudi Arabia, the Gulf of Oman, and off the coast of the UAE. That included KC-135R and KC-46A refueling tankers, an E-3B Sentry AWACS plane, and a P-8 maritime surveillance aircraft. Those refueling tankers matter because they let combat aircraft stay in the fight far longer. It shows this is a sustained campaign, not a one-off.
Now, President Trump also brought back the blockade. What do we know?
That's right. He announced the reinstatement of, quote, the Iranian blockade, end quote. And CENTCOM says it officially resumes today, Tuesday, July 14th, at 4 p.m. Eastern. The president described the U.S. as the, quote, guardian angel, end quote, of the strait. But CENTCOM clarified the blockade specifically targets vessels traveling to or from Iranian ports and coastal areas, while still supporting traffic for all other permissible ships.
So it's not a total shutdown of the waterway?
Correct, at least on paper. The idea is to isolate Iran's shipping while keeping global commerce flowing. But in practice, Grace, that's an extremely delicate balance in one of the world's busiest and most contested choke points. Any miscalculation could strand more vessels, like the 6,000 seafarers we told you about earlier. The margin for error here is razor thin.
I understand there's also a controversial fee proposal. Tell me about that.
This is one of the most contentious pieces. President Trump proposed charging a 20% security fee on all cargo shipments passing through the Strait of Hormuz as reimbursement for U.S. protection. He specifically named Israel, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE as allies who should chip in. But this idea is facing serious pushback, even from within his own administration.
Pushback from whom?
From his own Secretary of State, actually. CNN reports that Marco Rubio described the toll idea as, quote, not even workable, end quote, and, quote, not doable, end quote. On top of that, the International Maritime Organization stated, there's simply no legal basis for mandatory tolls in a strait. So while the president is promoting it publicly, the legal and practical foundations look shaky at best.
Let's turn to Iran's response. How has Tehran retaliated?
Iran has hit back across the region. The UAE Ministry of Defense and CNN report that Iranian cruise missiles struck two UAE-associated tankers, the Mombasa and the Al-Bahia, in Omani territorial waters. That attack killed one Indian crew member and injured 8 others, 6 Indians and 2 Ukrainians. India's Ministry of External Affairs condemned the strikes and summoned an Iranian diplomat in New Delhi.
So this is now pulling in countries far beyond the immediate conflict.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so dangerous. When Indian and Ukrainian crew members are killed or wounded on UAE-linked tankers in Omani waters, you suddenly have multiple nations with a direct stake. It widens the diplomatic fallout well beyond Washington and Tehran. India's response shows how quickly this can ripple outward.
And Iran struck several other neighbors too, correct?
It did. In Bahrain, multiple waves of strikes triggered missile alert sirens for the 3rd time on Tuesday. The IRGC claimed it targeted a building housing U.S. forces at the Jafar base, along with several weapons warehouses. In Kuwait, the Iranian army reported drone strikes on a U.S. military base, hitting an ammunition depot, fuel tanks, and a Patriot air defense system.
What about Jordan? They've been caught in the middle before.
They have. The Jordanian military reported shooting down several Iranian missiles, though shrapnel still fell in various locations. Iran also targeted Jordan and various other U.S. military installations, but American officials reported no damage from those. So Jordan is again absorbing risk simply because of its geography, sitting in the flight path of these exchanges.
On the diplomatic side, is there any progress at all?
Not much, unfortunately. President Trump formally notified Congress that military action began on July 7th, though he previously described an earlier period of hostilities as ending on April 7th. He's now declared the ceasefire is, quote, over, end quote, and he dismissed the earlier memorandum of understanding meant to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons and to reopen the strait, saying Iran, quote, didn't honor the test, end quote.
And the talks we mentioned before, mediated by Qatar and Pakistan?
Those have stalled. CBS News notes that the indirect talks, mediated by Qatar and Pakistan, paused for the funeral of Ali Khamenei. So the very channels that might cool things down are essentially on hold. Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has expressed deep concern over the escalating military confrontation. Right now, the diplomatic track is barely moving, while the military one accelerates.
Let's talk money. How are markets reacting to all this?
The volatility is significant. According to CBS News and CNN, Brent crude oil rose to a 1-month high, settling at $83.30 per barrel. That's a 9.6% increase. West Texas Intermediate rose to roughly $78 per barrel. And the U.S. stock market reacted negatively on Monday, July 13th, with the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and the Dow Jones all posting declines.
That builds on the gas price surge we mentioned before, doesn't it?
It does, Grace. We'd already reported a roughly 30% jump in U.S. gas prices, and these new oil highs suggest more pain is coming for drivers and businesses. When the Strait of Hormuz is threatened, energy markets get jittery fast, because so much of the world's oil moves through it. So this isn't just a distant conflict, it's something people will feel at the pump.
And finally, what's the U.S. doing to protect Americans in the region?
In response to the heightened risk, the U.S. government has relocated all non-emergency personnel out of the UAE and canceled upcoming consular appointments. That's a clear signal that officials expect the danger to persist or even grow. Pulling diplomatic staff isn't done lightly. It tells you Washington is bracing for this confrontation to continue for some time.
Ethan, thank you for breaking all of that down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace. We'll keep tracking every development and bring your listeners the latest as it unfolds.
That was our reporter Ethan, updating our continuing coverage of the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. Stay with us, we'll be right back after the break. Good morning. Our next story takes us to Hollywood, where the biggest merger in the industry's history is now facing a serious legal challenge. To break it all down, we're joined by our reporter Chloe. Chloe, welcome. What exactly is happening here?
Thanks, Grace. So we're talking about a massive deal, the $110 billion acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery by Paramount Skydance Corporation. Just yesterday, on Monday, July 13th, a coalition of 12 states filed an antitrust lawsuit to block it. According to NBC News, Spectrum Local News, and Los Angeles Magazine, this is being called the largest merger in Hollywood history, and it's now heading into a courtroom fight.
12 states is a lot. Who's leading this effort, and which states are involved?
California Attorney General Rob Bonta is leading the charge. The lawsuit was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. Beyond California, the coalition includes the Attorneys General of Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, and Washington. So it really spans the country, coast to coast.
And what's the actual legal argument they're making against this deal?
The core of it is Section 7 of the Clayton Act. That's a law that prohibits mergers which may substantially lessen competition or tend to create a monopoly. The plaintiffs want the companies to delay closing the merger until the courts have finished their work. And Bonta's office has been clear. If Paramount and Warner Bros. Don't agree to pause, they'll file a temporary restraining order.
Let's dig into Bonta's concerns. What's he saying this merger would do to consumers?
Bonta calls these two companies, quote, entertainment behemoths, end quote, and he argues combining them would create a rigged market. That means higher prices and lower quality for viewers like you and me. He also contends the deal would lead to fewer television shows and films being produced overall. And that, in turn, reduces the chances for diverse stories, ideas, and perspectives to reach audiences.
You mentioned specific markets they're worried about. Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. According to Spectrum Local News, the coalition focuses on three main areas. The first is wide-release theatrical film distribution. Paramount and Warner Bros. Are two of the 5 major distributors, and together they'd control roughly 27% of that market. That would leave just 4 distributors, the combined company, Disney, Universal, and Sony, controlling 86% of these films.
That's a huge share. What about the big blockbuster movies specifically?
That's the second area, what they call anticipated top-grossing theatrical film distribution. In that submarket of high-budget blockbusters, the combined company would control over 30%. And 4 distributors would end up controlling more than 90% of those films. So when you think about the biggest movies of the year, the ones everyone lines up for, control would be concentrated in very few hands.
And I understand cable television is the third concern?
Right, that's licensing basic cable television channels. Warner Bros. Is currently the second largest player, and Paramount is the third largest. Combined, they'd hold a 27% share. A press release from Bonta's office notes the new entity would control nearly 1/3 of all basic cable programming in the United States. That's a striking figure when you consider how many channels families flip through every night.
Who else gets hurt if these numbers are right?
The lawsuit argues movie theaters and basic cable distributors would take a real hit. They rely on competition between studios to secure fair pricing, and less competition means less leverage for them. There's also a concern that Los Angeles Magazine highlighted, though it isn't in the lawsuit itself. The merger would put both CNN and CBS News under one corporate roof, and some worry about that kind of consolidation of news brands.
That's a big deal for the news world. Now, what is Paramount saying in its own defense?
Paramount is pushing back hard. In a statement reported by Los Angeles Magazine, the company said the complaint reflects a, quote, fundamentally flawed application of the antitrust laws, end quote, and is wrong on both fact and law. Their main argument is that the merger is necessary to create a stronger competitor. They say they need the scale to challenge dominant technology and streaming platforms like Netflix and Amazon.
Interesting. So they're framing themselves as the underdog against streaming?
Exactly. Paramount claims those streaming giants have already harmed theatrical exhibition and entertainment jobs. So in their view, a bigger, combined studio is actually good for the traditional movie business. It's a clever reframing, positioning the merger not as a threat to competition, but as a defense of it.
Has anyone from the company made specific promises to reassure the industry?
Yes, Paramount CEO David Ellison has tried to calm those concerns directly. He said the company intends to keep acquiring content from third parties. He also pledged to release at least 30 films annually for full theatrical exhibition, with a minimum 45-day window. And Paramount argues that delaying the transaction will only further harm entertainment workers who are already struggling with technological disruption.
Let's talk about how we got here. This deal already cleared some major hurdles, didn't it?
It did, and that's part of what makes this lawsuit so notable. Warner Bros. Shareholders approved the merger back in April of this year. Then, on June 12th, about a month ago, the U.S. Department of Justice approved the transaction. They determined it was unlikely to harm competition or consumers. So the states are essentially challenging a deal that federal regulators already blessed.
What about regulators outside the United States?
Paramount points out that regulators in numerous other countries have signed off. That includes Canada, Brazil, China, Australia, and South Korea, all concluding the merger doesn't pose a threat to competition. But two big reviews are still pending. The European Commission is expected to rule on July 22nd. That's just about a week from today, and the United Kingdom's Competition and Markets Authority is still reviewing the deal.
So even with all those approvals, there's still unease within Hollywood itself?
There really is. The Hollywood Reporter says the combined company would take on an estimated $79 billion in debt. That would leave them with only $3 billion in annual free cash flow. And that gap has led some people to question whether the company can actually maintain those projected production levels Ellison promised.
That's a striking imbalance. Is anyone in the creative community speaking out?
Yes, quite loudly. More than 1,000 industry professionals, including writers and actors, have signed an open letter protesting the merger. So you have this interesting split. Federal and many international regulators say it's fine, but a dozen state attorneys general and 1,000+ creative workers are raising red flags. It's shaping up to be a real clash over the future of the industry.
So what should we be watching for in the coming days?
The immediate thing is whether Paramount and Warner Bros. Agree to pause the closing. If they don't, expect that temporary restraining order from Bonta's office. Then there's the European Commission ruling on July 22nd, which could shift the momentum either way. Between the courtroom here and the regulators abroad, the next couple of weeks will tell us a lot about whether this $110 billion deal survives.
It sounds like this story is far from over. Chloe, thank you so much for walking us through all of it.
My pleasure, Grace. I'll keep tracking it and bring you updates as they come.
That was our reporter Chloe, breaking down the legal fight over the Paramount Skydance and Warner Bros. Discovery merger. We'll be right back after the break. Here are some other headlines. Starting with some legal drama, U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams has put the brakes on a $10 billion lawsuit filed by President Donald Trump against the IRS and Treasury Department. The judge ruled on Monday, July 13, 2026, that the suit was filed for an improper purpose, accusing the president and his lawyers of trying to play both sides of the court. She noted that suing agencies under his own control was a case of self-dealing that bypassed the need for adverse interests. While the case was already dismissed in May, following a settlement over tax leaks, which included a shelved $1,776 million anti-weaponization fund, the judge says the government cannot claim the deal was a legitimate legal process. This ruling comes just before Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche faces the music at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing this Wednesday. Meanwhile, the legal team is feeling the heat. Attorney Alejandro Brito has been referred for disciplinary action in Florida, and Daniel Epstein has been banned from filing in the Southern District of Florida for up to 1 year. Turning to a tragedy in Maine, an ICE officer fatally shot 26-year-old Colombian man Joan Sebastian Guerrero during an enforcement operation in Biddeford on Monday morning. The Department of Homeland Security claims the officer fired while fearing for public safety as Guerrero tried to make a getaway in his vehicle. However, the situation is getting murky. While Senator Angus King initially suggested Guerrero was the target, his office later reported that he was actually not the target of the warrant. Guerrero is described by neighbors as a husband and father to a 3-year-old daughter, and advocates claim he had a legal work permit, though officials have yet to confirm if he was truly cleared for stay. In the Capitol, the Pentagon is doubling down on security. The National Guard deployment in Washington, D.C. has been extended through Inauguration Day 2029. Part of the Safe and Beautiful Task Force, this summer's surge has pushed troop levels to approximately 5,000 members from over 20 states and U.S. territories. These deputized special police are costing taxpayers more than $3 million a day to keep the peace. Across the pond, Hungary is seeing a political shakeup. Parliament voted 139-6 to pass a constitutional amendment to boot President Tamás Sulyok from office. Driven by Prime Minister Peter Magyar and the TISA party, the move also introduces 12-year term limits for lawmakers. Fidesz party leader Gergely Gulyás boycotted the session and resigned, claiming the move breaks the legal system. Finally, things are heating up in the Pacific. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology confirms El Niño is officially established. With sea surface temperatures hitting record highs in May, experts warn this could be one of the strongest events since 1950, likely leaving Australia feeling the burn with warmer and drier conditions for the rest of the year. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.